Tonight, troubling allegations of child sex abuse, dating back decades, coming to light for the first time.
I never told anybody. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed.
Allegations against a man considered a pillar of community in Mount Morris and Rochester.
This is an evil person. And
a trusted teacher, chaplain, and foster parent.
In this case, the accused, 74-year-old James Mulcahy, was never charged. He has remained active in the local religious community for the last 40 years. He now works as a liaison in Ukraine for Open Arms Metropolitan Community Church. He also worked for the Rochester Diocese, and that's where this story begins. It's hard to miss St. Patrick's in Mount Morris. The steeple rises above all else. In 1977, a 13-year-old boy came here to prepare for his confirmation. But nothing, he says, could prepare him for what really happened.
And then he started molesting me.
He is James Mulcahy, at the time St. Patrick's Religious Education Coordinator. To the alleged victim, he was even more.
He was like a father figure or like a big brother, you know. I trusted him. 100% completely trusted him.
It is here at this home, once owned by James Mulcahy on a rural road in Nunday, that the alleged victim says much of the abuse took place. Once filled with farm animals and tractors, the alleged victim recalls it as a child's dream. In reality, this is where he says his nightmare began.
So I started spending the weekends there, staying overnight, and then he started molesting me. But I mean, I don't know what I could have done. Once it happened, it got exponential.
One day he says he refused to go with Mulcahy, but kept his secret out of shame and fear.
I was afraid for my family. I was afraid for my little brother. And because the more that I got to know this gentleman and this all started happening, he really started to turn out to be a creep. The guy was kind of scary.
Even away from Mulcahy, he says the abuse gnawed at him every day for 16 years. In 1994, he sought counseling and went to the Livingston County Sheriff's Office to report the alleged abuse. The accuser gave a sworn deposition and agreed to help deputies record a conversation with Mulcahy. According to the report, in that phone call, Mulcahy told the alleged victim, "The things that happened between you and me were very special to me, and I thought they were to you."
At one point in the conversation, I said, what really bothers me, I think, is that I lost my virginity to a man. And he replied, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were a virgin."
We, too, wanted to hear from James Mulcahy and tracked him down thousands of miles from Mount Morris in Ukraine. Speaking via Facebook, Mulcahy denied the allegations.
And I certainly never did anything like raping him. It's not me. It's not the kind of person I ever was.
Mulcahy was never charged. The criminal statute in this case had expired 7 years earlier. The story might have ended there, but the birth of the alleged victim's first child this year brought him back to that 1994 police report. One line that kept replaying in his head, a note from the deputy. A check of our records indicate prior reports of the same nature against the suspect. Were there more victims?
I don't understand how somebody can be doing that and get away with it.
Determined to seek some kind of justice, he has filed a claim with the Rochester Diocese, citing the alleged sex abuse by Mulcahy. Leander James is his attorney. He has represented hundreds of sex abuse victims and believes this is a solid case.
But this man had the courage to come forward and go to the police and to disclose to them and give them information. And apparently they had information about other potential victims out there. Sounds like a lot of them. What they did with that information, I don't know.
Now, like the steeple on top of this church, the boy who came here 40 years ago is rising up for himself and just maybe another boy like him.
I don't understand how somebody can be doing that and get away with it. It's got to be corrected somehow.
We did contact the Diocese of Rochester for comment about the accuser's allegations, and we're told it is their policy not to comment on individual cases. This is not the only allegation against James Mulcahy. Tomorrow night, what our investigation uncovered about other young people who say they too were victims. Tonight, we follow up on disturbing allegations of child sex abuse against a trusted religion teacher at St. Patrick's in Mount Morris, dating back decades. Our report last night began with one accuser who filed a police report that raised serious questions about other possible victims, allegations that have not been pieced together until now. What we learned shows the difficulty for young victims in coming forward and how that can often allow crimes to continue for years.
I have everything. I have the police reports. I have the depositions. I have
the story told on these pages has kept this man in the shadows of shame for much of his life.
It's a secret that you walk around with every day.
A secret, he says, started when he was 13 at St. Patrick's in Mount Morris. It's when he says he was sexually abused by his religion teacher, James Mulcahy.
He started picking me up on the weekends, taking me to the farm. After a few months, I started spending the weekends there, staying overnight, and then he started molesting me.
A secret for 16 years, until 1994, when this now grown man reported the alleged sex abuse to the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. But the criminal statute had expired. James Mulcahy could not be charged. Still, this accuser found a reason for hope. The deputy noted, quote, prior reports of a similar nature against the same suspect.
I felt not so alone and that like maybe we could do something, but it didn't happen.
To find out what happened, we went to the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. There is still a file on James Mulcahy. Inside, we learned he was charged in 1987 with sexual misconduct involving a 14-year-old at Mulcahy's home in Nunday. The alleged victim, a foster child, who told police Mulcahy began fondling him at night, and it escalated in an incident the victim reported to police. Mulcahy denied the abuse, but admitted to police, quote, there is a lot of nudity in the house and a lot of affection between he and the boys. He called the accuser a chronic liar. More than a year later, the charge was dismissed. That foster child who lived here in 1987 is the first to immediately report sex abuse claims to police against James Mulcahy. But he is not the first to say he was sexually abused here. We trace those claims as far back as 1978.
I was ashamed. I was embarrassed.
This man says he was sexually abused by Mulcahy for 1 year, ending in 1978. 1979 is the time stamped on 2 other sex abuse reports in that file on James Mulcahy. One victim was 13 and said Mulcahy sodomized him 2 or 3 times during sleepover retreats at his Nunday home. The second alleged victim was a foster child who says Mulcahy, quote, sodomized him once a week for 2 years. Again, nothing could be done. The reports were not made until 2002. The statute had expired. We were only able to ask Mulcahy about one of the allegations. We located him in Ukraine, doing work for a local church. Speaking via Facebook, he admitted hosting sleepovers with boys, but denied any sex abuse.
I deny ever molesting him. I don't have his memories, and I'm not responsible for what he says or does.
When we followed up to ask Mulcahy about the other alleged victims, he had deactivated his Facebook account.
There's more to look into. I mean, the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but it certainly causes concern that there truly might be something there.
Deputy Chief Matthew Burgess was never involved in this case, but says experience has taught him child predators generally do not stop until they're caught. Leander James, who is representing this Mount Morris victim, says predators capitalize on the fear and shame that keep young victims silent.
And it's in that scenario that violators continue to violate and violate and violate because they're under cover of darkness. We've got to expose the light of day on it.
There were no more reported cases of alleged abuse against Mulcahy after 2002. Through it all, Mulcahy was a foster parent, religion teacher at St. Patrick's, and teacher at Mount Morris High School until 1981. After that, he worked for the Rochester Diocese and personnel, and as a chaplain at Park Ridge Hospital until 1993. Mulcahy also served as pastor of Metropolitan Open Arms Community Church in Rochester. He retired in 2014, but continues work as a liaison in Ukraine.
I'd like to confront him face to face.
Like his long-kept secret, this alleged victim hopes to one day come out of the shadow and finally face the man he says stole his innocence.
It's got to be corrected somehow. I mean, my whole life was taken away from me. What's 40 years of your life worth?
And that alleged victim is one of dozens to file a claim with the Diocese of Rochester, citing various sex abuse claims. It is their only avenue if the statute is expired, but many victims are pushing to pass legislation that would extend the statute in New York, giving victims more time to seek civil or criminal charges. It is opposed by the Catholic Church. Don?